welcome to That Bible Guy and to your daily devotional series on Isaiah. Today, you know it, we've reached Isaiah 61 in what is going to be my last week on this Isaiah series. I will reflect more as the week goes on, but just the idea that this is the last week after what has been 2 months that we've reached this point is really unbelievable. You may notice the screen is different. You're seeing the map on the other side. Thanks for the heads up of changing the mirror image. I found a way to do that this morning. So you've been looking at me like in a mirror up until this point. Keep making tweaks and changes, which is great. I also want to say there's a little problem with the Isaiah 59 video. It's not currently on. I can get it privately viewed. I need to check with YouTube on that, why that's happened. I haven't been able to get clarity on it just yet. So I'll get back to you on that. I just want to also let you know as well, I had plans where it was said about doing why we should trust the Bible series. Well, again, I've had some feedback and also thinking about an alternative series. I will get back to that one, basically on evidences for God. Where essentially that's what I've been working on recently with the book that I was talking about and things I've covered for many years, where I do actually cover 7 key evidences for God in a handy acronym. So basically in a way that you will not forget. And the acronym is FAITH. 7 key evidences. I was thinking of doing maybe 2 videos per week. One video will be on the evidence itself, all the details of the evidence. And the second video will be, well, how do I then use that with a skeptic, atheist, or non-believer? How do I use that and deal with the objection to that evidence as well? Because within them evidences you'll get objections. So covering the evidence and practically how to use it. That second video will probably be for patrons that have supported the ministry work. Sorry to say I've got that extra day that I'm trying to do that. So that'll be the first video will be just the evidence. And for those who are able, that second video just in terms of how to practically use that. Certainly I want to make this series more and more practical for me. I learn things, but it's only in order to help people. I'm not interested in just gaining knowledge for the sake of knowledge. So I will put out a lot of information on evidences for God in that acronym, so you will remember it with a little bit of effort. But it's also how do I use that with a skeptic on the street though? How do I use that in conversations? How can I help that make sense? So it's at a street level so we can understand it. Some of it I'll pitch it quite high maybe, but it is in a way that can communicate it. Otherwise, I don't see the value in it. It can be communicated to people and be understandable, as I like to make things. So yeah, Isaiah 61, our lives display God's glory. Our lives, you and me as Christians, what people should see is a display of God's glory. God is seen through us. And that's what we'll see in this chapter, Isaiah 61. We're continuing the positive theme of redemption, of God, what God will bring to his people, what God's intentions for his people are. This Isaiah 61, the Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives, and release from darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favour and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn and provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. They will be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of his splendour. You may recognize this. The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me because he's anointed me to preach good news to the poor. If you look in Luke 4, you'll find that Jesus went into the temple in Nazareth and he stood up among the people and he read from the scroll of Isaiah 61 and said, today, incredible, this is fulfilled in your hearing. Whoa, Isaiah 61. They're familiar with this scroll. Maybe it was a scroll that they would regularly read out on that day. Maybe Jesus was getting up to read it and no one batted an eyelid until he said, today this is fulfilled in your hearing. I'm that person. The Spirit of the Lord is on me. I'm going to preach good news to the poor. I'm going to heal up the brokenhearted. I'm going to release those in prison, in darkness. That's me. I mean, what a moment. when he declared that it was him. So this is again another prophecy about the Messiah and what his mission was going to be. Again, if you read on, we're going to come back to verse 3 in a moment. That's my key verse for this today. But again, if you read on about God's intentions for his people, they will rebuild ancient ruins. Again, you will be called priests of the Lord. You will be named ministers of our God, all Christians, priests of the Lord, ministers of our God. In their riches they will boast. He talks about getting a double portion in verse 7, and everlasting joy will be theirs. Again, it goes on and on and on. I delight greatly in the Lord. My soul rejoices in my God, for he has clothed me with garments of salvation and arrayed me in a robe of righteousness, as a bridegroom adorns his head like a priest, and as a bride adorns herself with her jewels. And I've got to read this verse. I love this verse. For as the soil makes the sprout come up, and a garden causes seeds to grow, so the sovereign Lord will make righteousness and praise spring up before all nations. I mean, it's just another chapter where you're just blown away with how many times God talks about bringing his people. They're priests of the Lord, ministers of our God. They're going to have everlasting joy. I mean, you couldn't get better than this. God's future plans for us are incredible. And we really got to dig deep to see what they are. He's telling us what they are. Again, I know I covered this yesterday. I couldn't help myself today again. God's intentions. This is a good evangelistic thing. If you're reaching out to people and saying, what's God really want for his people? Why is it all about abstinence as a Christian? No, let me just share with you what God has planned for those who love him. Let me just share. Again, it's a great sharing point. But verse 3 is what I want to focus on. It's the second part of verse 3. Again, Jesus talking about, well, he's not talking their messianic prophecy. This is what Jesus will do. He's bringing comfort for those who mourn, verse 2, and provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, oil of gladness instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of spirit of despair. And it's this bit. It says, they will be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of his splendor. So, first bit, they'll be called oaks of righteousness. Oaks, it's a large tree. A strong structure. We will be called strong structures of righteousness. You will be seen to be a strong structure of righteousness. It's said of an oak tree that the ruling majesty of the woods. It was described as a ruling majesty of the woods because they're so majestic and large and strong. And it says, God says of his people that they will be called oaks of righteousness. Regardless of how you see yourself as a Christian, if you're following God, this is his plan for you. This is what he's bestowed on you. And in a sense, this is the way he sees you. Now that Jesus has died for you and you've accepted and been baptized into that, you're an oak of righteousness, a strong structure of righteousness. I love that description. That's you, that's me, as followers of Christ. If you're not a follower of Christ, I'm sure that's what you would want. To be an oak of righteousness. The second bit, it says, a planting of the Lord. It's a lot of garden terminology. And it's really lovely looking out at the garden at the moment. My wife is supposed to be off at the Chelsea Flower Show at the moment, actually. But she's had to cancel that. It was a birthday present to her mother, and they've had to cancel that. So I think they're going to do, I've seen online, you can do a virtual tour, a virtual Chelsea Flower Show tour. Got that all right. So I might do that myself. But again, it says we are oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord. What does that mean? Well, does it make you think of anything that Jesus talked about, that we are a planting of the Lord? Well, we didn't put ourselves here. We're not here because of our decisions as such. We aren't where we are today because we've worked so hard for it. We aren't doing what we're doing today because we're so super talented and capable. And if we are, it's because God makes us that way. We are a planting of the Lord. We are where we are right now because God has planted us. He took something that was nothing, a seed. He made it into something, planted it, and it grows, just like you and me. He planted us. But what's it make you think of? John 15. the vine and the branches. Yeah, I know that's what you were thinking. I hope that's what you were thinking. There's many other scriptures, I'm sure. John 15, verse 1. I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. Verse 5. I am the vine, you are the branches. If a man remains in me, and I in him, he will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. I remember a Christian many years ago, he took issue at this. He didn't like this idea that without God, without being connected with God and the vine, without being in that vine with God, who we are just a branch, we can do nothing. He just didn't like that idea. But this is the reality. God is the Alpha, the Omega, the creator of all things. Why would that surprise us? He is the one that holds it all together. He planted us. Without him, we can do nothing. This is humbling, but it's really good to remember. Wherever we're at right now, it's not dependent on us. Thank goodness. Where you're at right now, what growth you'd like to see in your life, whatever you'd like to do in your life, as a Christian, it doesn't depend on you. It depends on blossoming in the way God has planted you. I just had a little thing that came to my mind there right now. I wasn't intending in sharing this, but it's sometimes working out where do I go from where I'm at in life right now. Little phrase I always love is bloom where you're planted. Bloom where you're planted. And that includes the pandemic, where we sit right now. Bloom where we're planted. Wherever you've been put, wherever God has you right now, bloom there. Don't be saying, whenever I get to this next stage, then I'm ready to go. I'm ready to get up and seek God and to reach out to my neighborhood and whatever it is, if this next thing happens. Bloom wherever you're planted. I have a lot more to share on that in terms of my own ministry and my own development after being very disillusioned several years ago. Bloom where you're planted, but it's God that planted us. Last bit. It says we're oaks of righteousness. We're a planting of the Lord. Why? For the display of, this is the key word, his splendor. For the display of his splendor. God's intention, as wonderful as we are, is to display his splendor through us. Is to show people himself through you and me. God's intention is that when people look at us, they see God's glory. Our lives should display his glory. In a sense, we're like an advert for God. There are many signs of God all around us. He's not left himself without testimony, it says in the book of Acts. But we are adverts, if you like, for God. If we call ourselves Christians and we are part of the vine, planted by God, blooming where we're planted, we are adverts for him. Do we display his splendor? This is the thing to think about, because so often for me, my challenge has been wanting to display my own splendor, wanting to get glory for myself, which is a very hollow thing to chase after. And I quickly learned that as a Christian. I want to do well in things. We all want to do well in things. We want our names to be mentioned. We want people to think highly of us. We want people to take our ideas on board. We want people to consider us to be intelligent, smart, attractive, whatever it is. And we get some glory for the things that we do. God works through us. He transmits his righteousness onto us. He plants us in order for people to see him through us. We are walking adverts, a walking manifestation of God on this earth. I don't go too far with that last phrase. For other people to see. In ourselves, we are weak. What this means is we are incapable of doing the right thing. We bring nothing but weaknesses to the table. It's only God's splendor that people should see. Well, what this all means, this is a very liberating thing. Because people see God and not us, in a sense, we all take a back seat, and it doesn't matter how weak you and me are. Breathe a sigh of relief when I say that. It doesn't matter about our weaknesses. I'm not saying we don't try to grow in our weaknesses, but it doesn't matter what weaknesses we bring to the table. Paul said, when I'm weak, I'm strong. The more aware we are of our weaknesses, the more God can shine. The more full of ourselves we are, the more we hinder God from shining. The greatest thing I've ever seen as a Christian is a situation where someone was shining. Maybe someone, the things we say, they got up and spoke very well. They maybe had a great series that they did, a great commentary, a book series. Somebody got up and song leading was incredible. Maybe someone got up and did it, again, got out and reached out in their neighborhood and invited and helped many people become Christians. They do these things and you think, well, that's incredible. But then you hear the actual internal goings on in their mind and their heart was that they actually felt really weak or burdened or heavy or stressed. Or they just felt like they didn't do a good job. I'm my worst critic. I criticize myself. I watch everything I ever do back again and I criticize it. It does help me get better. But when I hear that from that person, it makes me think, wow, that's the way it should be, because we should know when we look at other Christians, God is shining through you. It's not your strength. God is shining through you for the display of His splendor. If a non-Christian looks in at a Christian world and sees people all doing things on their own effort, why be inspired by that? They'd be intimidated and insecure by that. They look in at a church and see people doing things which they claim are all because of God. They're all demonstrations of God working in their life. Then that's inspiring. How do we know if we're displaying God's splendor in our life? Do you know what? For me, it's what do we say? Who gets the glory for what we do? One of the things that I am so careful about at the moment is any praise I get, God enabled me to do it. And it's not shallow words. I 100% mean it. God is awesome. Everything that's happening for me in my series has all been down to God. I don't know where God's going to take things, but it's up to Him, and I'm loving the journey. But I have fallen in this many times. What do our words say? Do we give God the glory? I pray we give God the glory for the display of His splendor. So we are oaks of righteousness, strong structures of righteousness, and that will grow. God has planted us. It means He's got plans for us. And it's all for the display of His splendor. I do hope this helped us today. There's many great things to meditate on in this passage. We've got 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, and that will be it this week. Get back to me what you think on that series idea. Again, 7 evidences for God's existence, which stuff I've studied it a lot recently. I'd really love to share that. Give me any of your thoughts on that. I do hope you're all doing well. You know the score by now. Please just like this. If it's been any help to you, please comment on it. Please share. Subscribe to the YouTube channel of That Bible Guy. Go on and check out my website as well. So many things to share. If you want to go and financially support the ministry and the development of all this, you can go to patreon.com as well. I do appreciate you tuning in today. Be with you again tomorrow. Let's get God's word out there. Amen.